Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, back with another Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals. I'm here to talk about Windcliff Sanitarium. I have done a Windcliff video before, but not quite like this. I've never broken down the individual reasons why certain people end up here in this mental institution. It's important to note this isn't just a place for the criminally insane. This is a place where people can actually go and get help, whether it be mental or otherwise. So let's take the first person we know that gets put there, Maggie Evans. Now, why does Maggie get put there, you might ask, if you're not familiar with the story? Keep in mind there's a lot of setup to Maggie going to Windcliff. It isn't just on a whim. The first real setup we get of, Maggie potentially going to Windcliff is before she's ever kidnapped. It's mentioned that a Dr. Hoffman is interested in Maggie's condition. And only one other person has had this condition before, Willie Loomis. All right, that's going to be another person who ends up in Windcliff. And you notice there's a connection here too, because both have a connection to one person, Barnabas. Now, they don't just have that connection, but I'll get into that here in a moment. They, with Maggie, Maggie is, sleeping during the day. She's awake at night. She's sleepwalking at night. And Sam, who wants to go out, just can't keep an eye on her all the time. And again, her condition is familiar to Willie's. Because in all honesty, when Maggie's condition happens, when she starts to, sleep during the day and be awake at night and not want to sleep, and when she does sleep, she dreams these terrifying dreams, by the way. Um, so there's that. Now, we didn't see what Willie dreamt. And that's the big difference too. We did not see what Willie dreamt, but I do believe he did. Because he would be white when he would wake up, he would be like. So there was that. Now with Maggie, right before Maggie's kidnapped, you're sort of going, okay, something's got to happen here. So she gets kidnapped, right? But before that, who's watching her? Victoria Winters. Victoria now knows her friend is gone. This is the first two people Victoria Winters met when she came to town was one Burke Devlin and two Maggie Evans. In that order. Well, actually, Burke Devlin, Mr. Wells, and Maggie Evans. In that order. So now Burke, who she's dating, Maggie's a great friend of hers. Her best friend, really. And now she's missing. Now she's taken. Someone has her. There's no ransom demand. And really, let's be honest here. We knew there was never going to be one because we know what Barnabas wanted her for. So Maggie ends up escaping Barnabas's grasp eventually with the help of Sarah Collins. She got an assist from a ghost, right? But she has been. Barnabas tried to mentally and physically break her, more mentally than anything else. I mean, he's trying. I mean, she's dressed. There's a scene where she's dressed like Josette and David Caesar. There's a scene where she's talking sort of like she is Josette. But Maggie begins to fight slowly but surely. And the most defining scene of this And if I'm loud, I'm sorry. I'm having trouble hearing. So I apologize if I'm being loud to you guys. I'm not trying to be. My ears don't have good range right now of my own voice. Um, Maggie does something very definitive. It's not just a recoiling. To me, the most definitive scene before she gets put in the basement and locked away, I'm Maggie Evans, and she slams the music box shut. This, to me, is the most definitive thing because it showed Maggie was not Josette. She may look like Josette, but this is not Josette. Maggie is a spitfire, she's a fighter, and damn it, she's going to fight to the bitter end. But going in that basement has her very much broken because, for one simple fact, is they're not trying, it's not like they're trying to give her, this isn't the Ritz here. You're not being treated very well. And she's not sure what Barnabas wield. What I mean by not sure, I'm sort of getting the sense that Maggie always felt Barnabas would hit her. Now, we do see Barnabas grab her by the throat in the cemetery, so there is that. Did he hit her? I don't know, and I can't answer definitively yes or no. You could say maybe. Is it implied? Um, I think the biggest implied really is really the most implied is when she's scared around. But though too, she knows what he is. So it's like, okay, did he or didn't he? So again, there's I guess the best implied is when she recoils and he calls her on it and she's like turning away. Now you could say again, it's just because he's a vampire. Again, do I think Barnabas hit her? I'm gonna say no because we don't see it. And I know I shouldn't go by that, but we don't. We do see him grab her by the throat, though. There is that. So once once Maggie escapes with the help of Sarah, and she ends up beneath Widow's Hill, her father finds her because of Sarah, and at the hospital they have to make a judgment call. Now they've mentioned Dr. Hoffman before by last name only. This time you get a full name, Dr. Julia Hoffman. Now the he has become a she, which is great. This is the best sex change you'll ever see in the history of television, in my opinion, because they cast the lovely Grayson Hall, who's very talented. And the less people know Maggie's alive, the better. So Sam and Joe have to tell everybody Maggie died at the hospital. Maggie died at the hospital. And so, and obviously Dr. Dave Woodard's going to sign off on this and make it look, yeah, she died. Because who's the first person to find out this news? Barnabas is. Barnabas. And right there, really, this should have alerted Woodard that Barnabas had something to do because they haven't told anybody. Remember, this woman was found underneath Widow's Hill. No one knew where she was. Oh, Barnabas, I've heard that the Evans girl was brought here. It's all through it's all through the town. No, it isn't. Barnabas is lying, and it's a great lie. It's a lie you can't really call the bluff on to his face, and you can't call it immediately because again, where is Dave Woodard? He's in a hospital. He's been busy all night. The Maggie Evans showing up just made him more busy, and now he's got to be really busy because he's got to get her out of the hospital without anyone knowing other than Sam and Joe. And by the way, the nurse, too. There's a nurse that sees Maggie. Woodard tells her, you got to say she died. to protect her from the person who kidnapped her. And, the nurse is going to agree to this. Is it cruel? Well, let's look at it how we know it now. On the surface, a bit, because we know Victoria Winters didn't have nothing to do with it. We know Elizabeth didn't have nothing to do with it. We know Roger, though him and Sam hate each other, had nothing to do with this. Bert clearly had nothing to do with this. So David had nothing to do with this. I gotta go down the list, right? So, but they have to be kept at bay. They have to be kept at an arm's distance. And you might say, well, why? Why? Because again, the less people know, the better. They don't know who took this woman. And again, you got to sort of keep in mind what they know. There was no ransom demand. Most likely, the person who had Maggie was going to kill her. Now, I don't believe Barnabas would have killed her because he had every opportunity. Look, this guy's a vampire, for God's sakes. If he wanted to kill her, he could have just snapped her neck and been done. But he hesitates all too often. He's too busy talking to her. It's like, you don't need to tell this girl you're going to kill her, right? So that's why I said Barnabas was never going to kill Maggie. And you say, well, he was going to turn her into a vampire. Again, he had every opportunity. I'll ask this. Does Maggie really need to accept being Josette to get turned into a vampire? No. No. She doesn't. He could just turn her. Now, but he doesn't. Because deep down, he knows what that would mean. That she would be like him. Now, they have to protect Maggie. They tell, news spreads that Maggie dies. By the way, after this is going to be the introduction of Anthony George as Bert Devlin. It's one of the most heartbreaking things to really happen in Dark Shadows since the death of Dr. Guthrie. Even though you know Maggie's alive, you're seeing how everybody is mourning this girl. And you're sort of want to scream at them, she's alive! But you can't. They can't hear you. Now, Maggie is at Windcliff. And again, I know I went the roundabout way of telling you why she was there. She's there because of, not just to get help and determine who did this to her, but for her own safety. Not because she's looking to kill herself, mind you, but because there's somebody out there who once took this girl and held her against her will. And they cannot afford that again. And they can't. So Dr. Julia Hoffman is treating Maggie. And she does a really, she does a good job. And, Sam and Joe's I got to say this. Sam and Joe's patience at her at first is sort of falsely whatever, because she is trying to help her. It's like, you want to talk to this girl. This girl doesn't know things, She's Hoffman realizes right away, this girl is in between fighting, not just trying to find her way herself back to herself, but she's not sure of how to do it. And Julia has to show her how to do it. And that's what Julia is really trying to do, until you find out that Julia's intentions are very, very different. That she has goals and wants of her own. And that's what makes her really interesting before you find out that she knows about a vampire. She knows what they are. So again, Maggie's reasons for being there are to protect her and to help her find herself again. Now, obviously, we know what happens. I'm not going to get into that. Willie Loomis. Now, to be fair, we only get so many visits. I think we get one visit with Willie at Windcliff, but Willie Loomis goes to Windcliff as a story in itself because it connects to Maggie. Again, I said about that Willie and Maggie had a connection, and it wasn't just to Barnabas. Well, they have a connection to each other. Keep in mind that when James Hall played Willie Loomis, he not only flirted with the women, he creeped them the hell out. So that's the connection he has with these women. Also, another connection they all have is Willie has had an interaction with Sam, with Burke, with Elizabeth, with Victoria, all characters Maggie has interacted with. So again, that's the other connection they have. Now, his interactions are different, obviously. So Willie Loomis, how does Willie end up in Windcliff? Well, I've did Willie Loomis character retrospectives before. So again, let's take Willie when we first meet him, played by the first actor, James Hall. Willie is very rough around the edges. He's not so much just flirtatious with women, he's very creepy to them. Do I get a Hannibal Lecter creepy vibe? Or a Jeffrey Dahmer creepy vibe? Or a Ted Bundy creepy vibe? I get a bit of Ted Bundy the first time with James Hall's Willie Loomis. I'm not saying that's where they were going. I'm telling you the vibe I get. He's very creepy. And I get the sense he has no problem manhandling women. Because he has no problem trying to get into fight with men. Or standing up to them. And throwing down for no real reason. Other than the men are standing up for the women. He figures if I defeat these men, these women are fair game. That's the one thing I take away from James Hall's performance. Now, when we get to right before we get to John Carlin, remember it's James Hall who showed the portraits as Willie Loomis. Young David Collins says, "Oh, that's Isaac, that's Jeremiah," and he takes him out to the foyer, and that is Barnabas Collins. And this is still James Hall. This is James Hall's last episode with Willie Loomis, as Willie Loomis. Sorry. Then it switches to John Carlin. Now, John Carlin brought the same exact kind of edge. And remember, when John Carlin takes over the role of Willie Loomis, keep in mind, James Hall has had an interaction with Burke. James Hall has had an interaction with Sam Evans. James Hall has had an interaction with Elizabeth, with Carolyn. Again, and Victoria, all characters Maggie has, and an interaction with Joe. All characters Maggie has interacted with. So again, and keep in mind, Jason McGuire brought this man to town. I'm not going to get into Jason here, but I just want to keep in mind that this character did not arrive simply by himself. So, Ryan Mitchell and James Hall had an interesting moment where, and I mean as their characters, Burke Devlin and Willie Loomis, where Burke was wanting to fight Willie right then and there. It didn't happen. It's hinted there. So when the fight happens in the Blue Whale, it's no surprise. Now, it's a bit of a surprise. Am I surprised by the knife of Willie? Yes, because we did not see that knife at Carolyn or Victoria. That's another thing. I can't completely make him Ted Bundy because he didn't try to kill these women or hurt them. But I'm sort of wondering if he felt, hey, if I get these men out the way, these women are fair game. Now, here's Willie Loomis, pulls a knife, you're dead, jailbird. And Burke Devlin knocks him on his ass. Thank God. he gets it handed to him in the blue whale. So Willie's licking his wounds. During this process, he's been digging into the Collins family history. He's been asking not just David about it, but you know Mrs. Johnson. He's been looking into the books. He's been looking into the legend of Naomi Collins, which is Barnabas Collins' mother. We know what's going to happen here, right? I've been over this one enough. Willie's going to accidentally find Barnabas, let him out. Now, let's get into the post of that. The next time we see Willie Loomis, know this. Jason McGuire has searched high and low for Willie Loomis. No matter what you think about Jason McGuire, we know he's a shit heel, but he's also a charmer too. Everything we know about Jason still is looking for Willie, because what did Jason know? Willie was going to get $500 to leave town. And he sort of almost gives this away to Victoria Winters. Well, he wouldn't have wanted to leave without any fond farewells. What Jason really knows is Willie doesn't have any money to leave. By the way, it's something he says later, and I'll get into that. So here's Jason. He's been looking high and low for Willie at Elizabeth's request. He's looked in on places that were other, like the cemetery. He's found one of Willie's cigarettes. So he knows Willie's been at the cemetery, and he's a little pissed. It's like, son of a bitch. You robbed a grave? I was going to give you $500. Look, $500 in 1966 cut a lot of ties. Not as many as it used to, but enough. It could have got you out of Collinsport, at least, and on a job. So keep in mind that while looking for him, Willie's had this scrape up with Burke. There's a very interesting conversation between Burke Devlin and Jason McGuire. Burke tells him, well, has he left town? And Burke, Burke's asking that of Jason, and Jason goes, I don't know. I can't answer that. I don't think he has. Well, why? He didn't have any money. And even Mitchell Ryan's Burke Devlin, okay, you can't get far without any of that. Now, Jason leaves the Blue Whale. He figured that's where Willie went, because Willie was not listening to him at this given point. He figured, well, maybe he went back there and, decided to end Burke Devlin with the knife. Who knows? But now that he sees he hasn't, he leaves. The Blue Whale door opens later on, and walking in that door is Willie Loomis. But this isn't the Willie Loomis who walked in with a chip on his shoulder. Willie Loomis looks defeated. He looks terrified, and he looks weak. He looks like a man who just wants to be left alone and left to himself. This is a very different Willie Loomis than what we last saw him. The last real image of Willie Loomis, I want you to think about this. The last time you see Willie as Willie is when he's smiling right before that hand. He's smiling, and then the smile turns to terror, and then the hand goes to his throat. Goes around his throat. Inside that mausoleum is where we last saw the Willie Loomis we once knew. Now, this is a different Willie Loomis. Burke Devlin goes up to him. Willie, you know what I told you before? Yeah, I know what you told me. There are words said by Willie Loomis, even Burke shocked me. I'm sorry, I don't want it. This perplexes Burke. You're sorry? Yeah, I'm sorry. Please just leave me alone. I'm sorry. Burke, are you all right? Are you sick? No, I'm just sorry. Just please leave me alone. I just want to be left alone. Burke grants him his request. But Burke's so disturbed by this 180 turn that Willie has made. And really, we are too. Because we know that Willie went from the frying frying pan to the fire. And as much as a scumbag as Willie Loomis was, you now feel sorry for him. You are feeling every ounce of sorrow of Willie. I mean, because keep in mind, Willie hasn't killed anybody here. Because if he had killed somebody, you're not going to have this emotion. You're not going to have this feeling. So Willie is just sitting there. In walks Jason McGuire. Burke grabs him. Says, come here. He goes, there's something wrong with your friend. Jason says, what do you mean? I know he's different. His whole attitude's changed. It's like he's a whole other person. Go see for yourself. I will. And when Jason interacts with Willie, Jason's noticing it right away. At first, Willie's happy to see him. Then when Jason starts asking questions, he sort of like shrinks back. Like, oh, I've been around. Around? Where? Well, where have you been? I've been looking for you, kid. He has been. It's true. Willie doesn't answer him. Jason notices the blood. This eventually causes Willie to pass out. Now we know what happens. Willie ends up back in Collinwood. He starts apologizing to people. Carolyn and Victoria sort of see the sincerity. Elizabeth does not give a shit. She still wants, I don't give a shit if he's sorry. Get him the hell out of here. I love Elizabeth on this one because she's had enough. I mean, and I can't blame her here because this is a man who was terrorizing not only her daughter, but Victoria Winters, her other daughter that no one knows about. Um, so obviously we know Willie works for Barnabas. Willie's going to go into the old house, fix it up. He's going to get beat. He's going to get beat down by the king every once in a while if he goofs up. Enter the Maggie Evans situation. He knows Maggie was kidnapped. Here's where things get interesting. Willie Loomis is still doing Barnabas's bidding. And finally, he's slowly starting to pull away from Barnabas. Remember, this guy did make a phone call to where Maggie Evans would be once in the cemetery. Now he's trying to go to her to warn her. Well, the Collinsport police had been stationed outside Maggie's home, and if you really want to learn how to shoot somebody, go to Collinsport because the police have no. There's such a low crime rate in Collinsport. All the police have to do is be at the gun range 24/7 and shoot their pistols. This is why they're so accurate. Not one bullet hits the glass. It all hits Willie. This is why he almost dies. That, Julia Hoffman goes to the hospital to take out the IV that's gonna save his ass. And the bullets got removed. He's removed the blood, I should say, because he's lost a lot of blood. And And not just from the bullet wounds, by the way. They say about, well, he still doesn't have much blood in him. It's amazing he's alive. Now, Willie obviously doesn't die. He ends up on Windcliff. You might say, well, why does he end up in Windcliff? Julie doesn't kill him. This is why. Remember, this is also a hospital for the criminally insane. They're investigating Willie as the person who kidnapped Maggie because he came to Maggie's door. This helps out Barnabas greatly. He puts Maggie's ring in a candle, underneath a candle in Willie's room. Julia confirms to the police, yes, it was Willie Loomis. I wasn't sure totally right away. I kept having to be sure because, even Barnabas said, well, he was on time. But even Barnabas says, well, I thought he was on time. I could be mistaken. No, see, here's the thing. No one's questioning the name Collins. I've said this before. The name Collins does not get questioned enough until Judah Zachary shows up. Oh, God. Next is Joe Haskell. And really, it's one of the best ways to write off a character who you don't want to kill off, who's been around, Joel Carruthers will never get enough credit, not just as Joe Haskell, but as Lieutenant Nathan Forbes. Keep in mind, Chris Jennings is in town, and Chris Jennings is a werewolf, but also Tom Jennings was turned into a vampire. Julia Hoffman is trying to keep Chris's secret. So, between her hypnosis, Angelique, who keeps summoning young Joe Haskell and biting him, and finally that gets resolved. They send Joe to Windcliff to protect Chris, to protect Chris's secret. It's not really a lot to get into because though I like how they do this, they didn't even want Tom Jennings revealed as a vampire. That Tom Jennings was a vampire right away. Though Tom was more acceptable than Chris because, hey, Tom tried to get Julia too. Now Barnabas knows how vampires work. The last person in Windcliff is Maggie Evans, the girl who went there first. But this time she's being hunted by a vampire in Roxanne Drew. And it's to get away from Roxanne, I really, really feel sorry for Maggie, because this is her second stint at Windcliff. The characters who go to Windcliff, one character goes there twice, Willie Loomis, Joe Haskell. The reasons they go there are all different. And I love that. Again, it's one of the best written shows, if not the best written show of the 60s, in my opinion. I hope you guys enjoyed this Dark Shadows video on this Thursday. You guys have a great day.